Hey guys, Scott and Nate from PlayYourCourt.com. Today we're going to go over the next gen, modern, and classic forehand and see which style is right for you.
For you.
All right guys, so this video is for all skill levels because I know beginner, advanced, we're all kind of trying to figure out how are we going to do this. There's a lot of different ways to hit your forehand, all the way from Johnny Mac, old school, all the way up to new school with like a Zizi pass or
Kyrgios. Yeah, a lot of different styles out there.
A lot of way different stuff going on, and I'm sure, especially if you're on the internet browsing around, you're seeing a lot of different looking forehands and you're thinking, which one is for me, Nate? What do I do here? How do I decide?
I'm excited about this because this is a topic that we discuss a lot in the forums and questions. If you're in YouTube and you're posting, you know, we may post something regarding a forehand fix or whatever else, and we'll get a comment that says, well, Kyrgios does this or whatever. And I think it's really dependent upon what forehand we're talking about. And I think this is also critical because there's a lot of us out there that are looking and we don't really have a guide of what we want to do. And we immediately look at the big, bright and shiny, awesome forehand. We go, I want to hit it super hard. And really should you? Let's talk about who these strokes apply to. But more importantly, I think we're going to give you the pros and cons and you decide what's going to be the best.
You got a custom fit here. Just because you love Federer doesn't mean the Federer forehand is what's right with the mechanics of your specific game. So don't just pick your favorite player and emulate him. That's not necessarily going to be what's best for your game.
Let's jump right into it, guys. Let's start with the classic forehand. It sounds like just what it is, right? It's the golden age.
Johnny Mac.
Yeah, all the old school forehands. When you imagine when they were playing with the wood rackets, the aluminum rackets, the game looked so different. It was a lot slower, so therefore the strokes looked a lot different.
Ironically, even though you're super old, I guess I'm going to demo this. All right, let's jump into demo mode now.
The key thing to note with the classic forehand is that it was played with a continental or a Eastern grip, and so we still see plenty of players that are playing with these particular grips. And yes, although you know Federer, Bautista, Good are playing with Eastern, they're still playing with the modern forehand. We're talking really about the era of John McEnroe and some of the greats from that era. And so the main thing here is that what you're going to see with Scott hitting is he's keeping his wrist really firm. There's not the pronation, the loose wrist that we see in the next gen or modern forehand. He's locking the wrist out, and the contact is actually quite a bit further back because he doesn't have the ability to pronate his wrist. He can't get the same extension, so he's locking the wrist out, and you're actually going to see he's making contact with the face open. So sometimes it looks like he's ushering the ball or moving the ball around. Now this can be great if you're a doubles player, you want to have a continental grip because you're trying to utilize transitioning to the net. Fantastic. This works for some. There's definitely deficits though. This technique is really difficult to use when you're getting a high ball. So if you're a player that plays a lot on clay, then maybe you would consider the modern forehand, maybe even the next gen forehand. But definitely some things to consider. All right, so obviously Scotty doesn't have a continental grip, maybe when you're teaching.
Yeah, that was not my favorite exercise.
Yeah, so what did you feel? Like, let's talk a little bit about it.
So honestly, I was kind of surprised. Down low, it actually feels pretty good, but up high, just atrocious. Like it just feels like I'm gonna spray everything deep. I had to really decelerate to keep the ball in the court when I'm up high. So definitely not a grip I would recommend. We've moved past that. That's why it's
a little antiquated. Yeah, it's the
ancient.
High balls. And you'll notice through the follow through, they're really kind of incomplete, not getting around, really just kind of swinging across the chest there.
It feels abnormal to actually bend over your shoulder. It feels more normal to just kind of continue on a straight line.
Yeah, and what you may have noticed there, Scott was hitting a lot of closed stance forehands because that's how this stroke actually works best. So you can imagine with the speed of the game now picking up. So as we get into kind of higher levels.
The run, it felt super funky.
Yeah.
Trying to hit it open stance felt super funky, so yeah, not very mobile with that stroke at all.
Yeah, yeah. So something to be, you know, the classic forehand, something to be appreciated, but if you're really looking to get your game to the next level, we have the modern forehand, and that's what's up next. All right, so next up, we're taking a look at the modern forehand, and this is what we see the most, certainly on the ATP, in the WTA. We'll talk about the difference with the WTA and ATP forehand in just a moment. There is a slight difference among some players. All right, but so the key things that we're seeing here is that the racket tip is up on the uniturn. Through the shoulder turn, the racket tip is up. And the modern forehand, the take back is abbreviated, and that's really the chief difference with the WTA. It's not going all the way back. But just like we see with Federer, as the racket goes back, the racket face drops to the ground, but stays on the right side of the body. The racket isn't getting to the left side of the body for a right-handed player until it's made contact and getting to the follow-through. All right, but through the racket drop on the right side, you're noticing here the lag that's created with the racket entering the slot by firing the hips. And therefore, with the modern forehand, we just saw a whole lot more open stance forehands. It's something that we still see to this day. The modern forehand, we're traditionally seeing more semi-westerns, occasionally westerns, but predominantly semi-western grips. And with this forehand, you're going to see the ability to get a lot more spin. We're able to get the ball further out in front, making contact out in front, and really get a lot of pronation. That loose wrist is encouraged to really accelerate. And this is what we're seeing in the game through Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, just to name a few. This is really kind of leading the race over the last 10 to 20 years.
All right, so that was the modern forehand, and that is your actual forehand. I guess that must be nice.
It was
That's
Nathan
fair.
Bowling playing.
Yeah,
Bowling.
I've got to hit this funky, stupid, kind of an old school thing, and you get to just do your everyday. But I would imagine that felt pretty good, yeah?
Yep.
Tell us about the benefits of your average forehand.
Average. So this is what we're seeing for the most part, and it's really a product of players that grew up in the 90s and a little bit beyond that. This is what started happening when the game picked up and we started seeing more topspin. The game was played at a higher air zone, so we started creating this loop, right, to make that easier.
We finally learned that we can get more power by dropping our racket into our motion than just starting down here too, which is a nice discovery.
And it's it's probably what we see the most in throughout the world. It's probably the most adopted at this point. For now, because what we see emerging over the course of, I don't know, last 6 years or so. The next gen. All right, let's take a look at that. All right, guys, so up next is the Next Gen Forehand, made popular by players such as Nick Kyrgios, Jack Sock, Dominic Thiem. This is where the evolution of the game has gone now. What we're seeing here is a high tape back with the racket head pointing forward and the elbow leading, and then the racket drop happening up at a much higher spot without allowing the racket to dip quite as low as what you see on the modern forehand. This enables it to operate much better on higher balls. It also gives it a slingshot effect to where it's able to produce a lot of power and a lot of spin. There's a lot more wrist extension, and that's why we're starting to see a little bit more Western grips along with the semi-Western grip, is because you can get this contact out in front a little bit further through extension, creating big spin. And you'll note here that the follow-through is actually lower than what we see on the modern forehand. It's truly a windshield wiper where it's leading below with the racket tip almost facing down. All right, so the Next Gen Forehand, this is RC's forehand. This is what he actually uses. And so the interesting backstory is, so I worked with Ryan from the time he was a little guy. Now he's like a great big guy. But I trained him with the modern forehand, all right? It was, gosh, I guess maybe 3 years ago. And the Next Gen Forehand was kind of breaking on the scene. I wasn't a complete, I didn't completely buy in. Now I'm sold for the right player. But so RC, you got to college and they changed your forehand. Tell us about that.
So yeah, when I showed up, most guys kind of have this forehand now in college. The game's just so fast. There's so much spin that people really load high or drop, and just so many more athletes. It's just crazy. It's just more speed, more control, and
Yeah.
Just kind of how I changed. My first semester, my coach kind of edited me and got me, and then I just naturally kind of fell into it.
Yeah. And so in RC, I would say you came back home, I would say it was about a 3 to 4 month adjustment. You know,
it was ugly the first time I came back, for sure. But
Yeah.
then about 2 months later, it kind of all ironed itself
It's all
out.
yours now. You're all, and that's, I think, the thing with this next gen forehand, because I think that's the big question. There's not a lot of people that are, you know, asking if they should go from the modern to the classic, but they're curious if they should switch to the next gen, and you need time. All right, so we'll get Scott back out here. We're going to go over a little bit of the positive and negatives, and hopefully by the end of this, you have a solution and you know what direction to be steered into. All right, let's pro-con this, and let's try to pave this path for the viewer and maybe help them figure out what direction to take their forehand.
Well, let's start with the classic because it's primarily con from what I experienced. So what I will give you is, if you're more of a doubles player and you like hitting slice forehands and you're going to be hitting a lot of balls low off the ground, then I would say classic is great. There's not a whole lot of other benefits to it. High balls are difficult. It's easy. It's not very easy to be mobile. Open stance is tough. So you can kind of see why this is the classic forehand is phased out, with what I would argue, you know, modern and next gen are stronger options to choose from.
Yeah, with the locked wrist, that classic really makes it difficult to produce the spin that's necessary to play in today's game. And this, you know, it's important to know, as teaching pros, when we need to level down, we're playing with a continental grip. Some people are playing with an Eastern.
For control.
Yeah, you're playing with an Eastern, and that can be high level, or you can, you know, depending on what you want it to be. Certainly we're not, Federer has an Eastern grip, and he's
to that point,
forehand.
and I hate to interrupt you, but I really want to get this out. So to that point, the reason we, if you think about it, we as coaches switch to that continental grip and the classic forehand to coach our students is actually to keep the ball in their strike zone. So it's literally the only reason and the only time we as coaches use this grip is actually to make it easy for the people we're hitting with to time their ground strokes. So obviously you don't want to do that in your matches. You want that ball to jump up. You want probably a next gen or a modern.
So the modern forehand.
You're biased, but I'm sure you feel strongly about this being a good time.
I mean,
I have a modern forehand as well, I suppose. So.
You know, I mean, obviously the modern forehand is kind of commonplace. That loop is everything, as long as it's a shorter swing. And that's, I think we made a point earlier about the ATP forehand dropping earlier, right? And the WTA forehand getting further back. Right. They're both good options, but as the game speeds up, you really want to be dropping the racket earlier, right, to keep extension, to keep contact further out in front. But this is where we're seeing semi-Western or Eastern grips. I would say for most players, I don't know, at a 4-0 level and below, playing with a continental Eastern, making a jump, the modern is what I would look to, and especially as we get older. All right, this is a little bit safer. We'll talk about the injury stuff here in the moment with the next gen. All right, so
I think the big thing for me, because the real decision point here, in my opinion, unless you're kind of an older school doubles player, we're talking about modern versus next gen here, really, right?
Yep.
I think for me, if you're at this skill level where you can't keep up with the speed with modern, like Ryan described to us, that to me is when I would switch to next gen. There's a ton of benefits, but that to me is the big one. I know there's more you probably want to say.
And when we're talking about skill level, we're talking about USTA 5.0 and above, UTR 11 and above.
College tennis players, super high level.
And with the next gen, so I was working with Ryan throughout this process, and so he's on court at school 3 to 5 hours a day. He's coming home on break, you know, and we're trying to work through it, and he's going back and forth.
This is not an overnight transformation. This is tough.
This is not.
You got to put some hours
I play
in
3 times a week. This is your path. Is you're an accomplished player. The next gen forehand, I mean, seeing is believing. It's a monster. I think if you're playing at a high level and you're looking for something else, like you said, implement it, but beware, because I will say I've messed with this a little bit in my game. Curiosity, if I'm going to teach it, I should know how to hit it, right? It's tougher in the arm. Yeah. It's tougher in the elbow. It's tougher in the wrist. It's just a very, very violent exchange.
To see if all these next gen players can't lift their arm 10 years from now.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope not, but that's it. Yeah. I hope not, Ryan. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button. If you never want to miss a video from Scott and I and some of our awesome guests like RC, hit subscribe. and we have this wonderful community.
Yeah, and you know I'm going to sell you on that thing. Guys, I know at the end of these videos I always plug this, but seriously, Nate and I are trying to build a worldwide tennis community that just makes it easy for you to play more tennis. The #1 reason people quit tennis is because they don't have anybody to play with. We don't want that ever to happen to you. Click the button below, jump inside our community, meet some new players at your skill level in your area, and we'll even send you some custom video coaching as a thank you for signing up. Click the button and check it out. We'll see you guys soon.
See ya.